The capture, the desert world of Veyra IX, shimmered beneath two dying suns, the air heavy with the smell of burnt metal and smoke. The human soldier named Ethan Cole stumbled across the cracked ground, his armor half melted, his breath shallow. Behind him, the ruins of his crashed dropship smoldered, a trail of black smoke curling toward the blood-red sky. He had fought for survival through storms and alien patrols, but now his strength was fading. The last thing he saw before his knees hit the dust was the shadow of a tall figure, glowing armor etched with silver veins, stepping out of the haze. She was Commander Alyndra Vael, the most feared officer in the Krynn Empire, a race that believed humans were primitive, unworthy to even look at their kind. Her soldiers, tall and expressionless, surrounded Ethan like statues carved from obsidian. Their weapons hummed softly, aimed at his chest. Yet when Alyndra raised her hand, they froze. Her eyes, icy blue and almost metallic, studied him with something between disgust and curiosity. Ethan lifted his head, trying to speak, but the pain made his words crumble into silence. Alyndra stepped closer until her shadow covered his broken body. "A human, alone," she said, her voice calm but sharp like a blade. "Why are you here?" "This world is forbidden to your kind," Ethan barely managed to whisper. "My ship crashed. No war, no threat." For a long moment she said nothing. Then she turned to her guards and gave a simple order that made them exchange confused glances. "Take him alive." No one argued. No one dared. When they dragged Ethan through the metallic corridors of the alien fortress, he felt the walls pulse faintly with life, as if the building itself was breathing. He saw alien symbols glowing on every surface, machines whispering in strange tones. The air smelled of ozone and something sweet but toxic. He was thrown into a cold glass cell, transparent on all sides. From there, he could see the alien soldiers marching in perfect rhythm, never speaking, never hesitating. Every few hours they would bring food that looked like silver paste. Ethan barely touched it. He had no idea if they planned to torture him, study him, or simply let him rot. But what disturbed him most wasn't the silence of his cell. It was the way Commander Alyndra sometimes came to watch him. She would stand on the other side of the glass, motionless, her expression unreadable. Her gaze pierced through him, as if trying to understand something she couldn't name. On the third night, when the lights dimmed and the guards changed shifts, Alyndra came alone. She dismissed the sentries outside with a wave of her hand. The guards looked uneasy. One even opened his mouth as if to question her, but the sharp edge in her eyes silenced him. When the door sealed behind her, the hum of the room grew quieter, as though even the walls were listening. Alyndra approached the glass, and for the first time her helmet retracted, revealing her face, smooth, angular, alien, yet strangely human in its sorrow. "You fought well," she said softly. "Most humans beg when they see us." Ethan's dry lips curved in a faint smile. "Maybe I'm too tired to beg." She studied him for a moment, then stepped closer until only the thin barrier separated them. "Your kind killed thousands of my people," she said. "Yet you look at me without fear." "Fear won't change what's already done," Ethan answered, his voice cracked but steady. Something flickered across her face, an emotion she quickly buried. Without warning, she pressed her palm to the glass. A shimmer of light spread between them, a pulse that made the cell vibrate. Ethan felt a strange warmth crawl through his veins, like his body recognized something ancient and forbidden. "What did you do?" he gasped, gripping his chest. Alyndra's eyes widened, but she didn't pull away. "You are not supposed to feel that," she whispered. When the door suddenly opened, two guards stepped in. They froze at what they saw, the commander's hand still pressed against the human's cell, the forbidden contact glowing like fire. The Krynn code forbade any commander from touching a human prisoner directly. The punishment was death, yet Alyndra didn't move her hand away. Her voice, calm and icy, cut through the silence. "Leave us." The guards hesitated. One tried to speak, but the other grabbed his arm, eyes wide in fear. They bowed their heads and left without a word. Outside, whispers began to spread through the fortress. No one had ever seen Commander Vael defy the law, not for anyone, especially not for a human. Inside the room, the light between their palms slowly faded. Alyndra stepped back, her breathing uneven, her eyes searching Ethan's face for something she couldn't explain. "You will not die here," she said, her voice trembling for the first time. "But from this moment, everything changes." Ethan didn't understand her meaning, but the tone in her voice made his skin crawl. He realized then that she hadn't captured him out of duty. Something deeper was at play, something dangerous. When the door closed again and Alyndra disappeared into the shadows, the guards outside stood silent, too afraid to speak. They had seen the impossible. Their commander had touched the human, and in doing so, had crossed a line that no one in the Empire dared to cross. The forbidden bond. The next morning, the fortress of Veyra IX stirred like a beast beneath storm clouds. Rumors spread across every corridor, whispered in fear and disbelief. The alien commander, Alyndra Vael, daughter of the Imperial High Council, had touched a human prisoner. No one dared speak her name too loudly, for even her shadow could destroy reputations. Yet now, even her most loyal guards questioned what they saw. Some said it was madness, others believed it was sorcery, but none could explain why the glass cell had pulsed with light when her hand met the human's. Ethan awoke to the sound of heavy boots approaching. His cell door hissed open and two armored figures entered without a word. They shackled his wrists with magnetic cuffs and pulled him to his feet. Outside, the air smelled of iron and ozone, the hallways gleaming with strange energy conduits. They dragged him through the command level, past alien banners, past soldiers who turned their faces away as though ashamed to look at him. And waiting at the end of that long hall was Alyndra herself, standing before the glowing insignia of the Krynn Empire. Her eyes were different now, no longer cold, no longer distant. There was something restless, almost fragile, hidden behind her commander's mask. When she saw him stumble, her hand twitched forward as if to help, but she stopped herself midway. The guards noticed. Every movement of hers was being watched now. The Empire did not forgive weakness, especially from someone of her rank. Still, she dismissed the guards with a low command. When they hesitated, her tone sharpened and they obeyed, leaving her alone with the human once again. "You shouldn't have done that," Ethan said quietly. His voice carried the weight of exhaustion but also defiance. "Your people are going to turn on you." Alyndra didn't answer immediately. She walked slowly around him, her footsteps echoing softly in the silence. "You do not understand what you are," she finally said. "That light between us, it should not exist. No human can react to Krynn biosymmetry. Our energy rejects your species. Yet you survived the connection." Ethan frowned. "Maybe I'm just lucky." Her voice dropped lower. "No human has ever survived luck with me." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Outside the chamber, thunder rolled through the alien skies as plasma storms began to form, a natural reaction of the planet to the growing energy disturbance in its core. Alyndra turned toward a console and projected a hologram. Ethan's image appeared on it, surrounded by alien symbols. "You are now classified as an anomaly," she said. "If the Council learns this, they will take you away. They will cut you open to see why you exist." Ethan's jaw clenched. "And you? What will they do to you?" Her silence was answer enough. Later that day, a summons came from the High Command. Alyndra was ordered to appear before the Imperial Tribunal in orbit. Her officers, loyal yet fearful, warned her not to go. "They have already decided your guilt," her lieutenant whispered. "They call it treason, consorting with the enemy." But Alyndra's face remained unreadable. "Then let them speak their judgment," she said. "I will not hide." Before she left, she entered Ethan's cell one last time. The lights flickered as she approached, as though the fortress itself recognized her presence. She stopped inches away from the invisible barrier. "I broke the law for you," she said quietly. "Do not waste it." Ethan stepped closer, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "Why?" he asked. "Why me?" Alyndra's voice softened, barely audible. "Because when I looked into your eyes, I saw something I had not seen in centuries. Humanity." Her confession hung in the air like forbidden fire. Then she turned, her armor gleaming under the red light, and left without looking back. Ethan pressed his hand to the spot where hers had been, feeling the faint warmth still trapped in the glass. Hours passed. The fortress fell into uneasy silence. The guards who once stood proud now avoided his cell. Some whispered prayers to the old gods, fearing the commander had doomed them all. Yet, when the night deepened and the wind howled across the barren world, a strange hum filled the air. Ethan's restraints released on their own. The glass door slid open. He looked around, stunned. No guards, no alarms, just the whisper of a familiar voice echoing through the communication system. "Run," Alyndra's voice said. "Now." Ethan hesitated only a second before moving. The corridors glowed dimly, the lights pulsing with red emergency hues. He sprinted past sleeping guards and dead surveillance eyes. Every corner he turned, a door opened just before he reached it, as if someone, or something, was guiding him. Finally, he reached the landing bay, where a small alien vessel awaited, its engines humming softly. He stopped short when he saw her standing by the ramp. Alyndra. She had returned, against every law, against every command. "You came back," he whispered. "You could have saved yourself." She looked at him, her voice calm but filled with quiet fire. "You don't understand. The line I crossed was not for mercy, it was for truth. You are the key, Ethan, the reason our wars began. The reason they must end." Before he could respond, alarms blared through the hangar. Soldiers poured in from every direction, weapons raised. Alyndra stepped forward, her hand on her blade, eyes glowing like burning ice. "Get in the ship," she ordered. "Now!" The moment Ethan took a step, a blast of plasma struck the ground beside them. The shockwave threw them both to the floor. Alyndra rose instantly, her armor smoking, her expression cold as steel. Her guards, her own soldiers, were aiming at her. For a brief heartbeat, no one moved. Then the lead officer shouted, "Commander Vael, by order of the council you are under arrest for treason." Alyndra's voice sliced through the chaos. "Then come and take me." Even her guards stood frozen, afraid to face the wrath of the woman who had defied an empire. And as lightning tore across the crimson sky, Ethan realized that the line she had crossed was not just between duty and emotion. It was between the chains of her species and the freedom of her soul. The storm within. The hangar exploded with chaos, the sound of plasma fire echoing through the metallic walls like thunder trapped in a cage. Sparks rained from above as alien soldiers surrounded their own commander, forming a shimmering wall of energy and betrayal. Commander Alyndra Vael stood tall at the center of it all, her silver armor flickering under the assault of emergency lights, her face a mask of calm defiance. The soldiers who once obeyed her every command now aimed their weapons at her heart, yet none dared to fire first. The legend of Alyndra, the commander who had crushed rebellions, who had conquered worlds, still lived in their minds, stronger than the fear of any court or decree. Ethan crouched behind a fallen console, the air thick with smoke and burning ozone. His heart pounded against his ribs, every muscle screaming to move, yet he could not look away from the woman who had once called him an enemy. Alyndra's voice cut through the confusion like a blade, commanding both authority and sorrow. "You would point your weapons at me?" she said, her tone sharp yet trembling. "For following what is right. You call me traitor, but tell me, who among you has looked at a human and seen something more than an animal?" The soldiers shifted uneasily. None answered. One tried to step forward, his weapon raised higher, but the look in Alyndra's eyes made him falter. "The council has blinded you," she continued, her voice growing stronger. "They have told us lies about these people for centuries. But I have seen the truth. This human carries something that terrifies them. Something pure. Something lost to us long ago." Ethan didn't understand her words completely, but the tremor in her tone told him that this wasn't only rebellion. It was revelation. Suddenly, the lead officer shouted, "Enough! Commander Vael is compromised," and raised his plasma rifle. Alyndra's reflexes were faster than thought itself. She moved like lightning, her blade slicing through the air with a whisper. The officer fell before he could pull the trigger, his weapon clattering against the cold floor. The rest of the squad hesitated, caught between loyalty and fear. That single moment of hesitation was all she needed. Alyndra seized Ethan by the arm and dragged him toward the ship. "Move," she commanded, her voice both fury and desperation. They sprinted through the chaos as bolts of blue energy scorched the ground around them. Alyndra deflected one shot with her blade, another with the flick of her gauntlet, her movements graceful and brutal at once. When they reached the ship's ramp, she turned, firing a burst from her sidearm that sent the hangar doors collapsing behind them, sealing off pursuit. "Hold on," she said as she leaped into the pilot's seat. The ship roared to life, engines blazing with white fire. Ethan stumbled into the co-pilot's chair, gripping the console as the vessel tore through the stormy skies of Veyra IX. The clouds glowed crimson and violet, lightning flashing in every direction. The ground below burned like a wounded beast, the fortress shrinking into a smoldering scar. Alyndra's hands moved across the controls with desperate precision, her jaw clenched, her eyes locked on the horizon. "They'll chase us," Ethan said between breaths. "They'll never stop." "I know," she replied, her voice low and heavy. "But they won't find us easily. There's a place they fear to go." Outside, the ship broke through the upper atmosphere, revealing the endless black sea of space. The Krynn fleet was already mobilizing, hundreds of warships forming silver lines across the void. Alyndra's ship was smaller, faster, but no match in a straight fight. "Hold steady," she muttered, pulling a switch. The ship veered sharply, diving toward a cluster of shattered moons. Ethan glanced at her, noticing the faint tremor in her hands. "You're hurt," he said. She ignored the comment. "You're still bleeding." He reached for the medical pack, but Alyndra's voice stopped him. "It's not my body that bleeds," she said quietly. "It's everything I believed in." The words hung heavy between them as the stars streaked past. For the first time since their escape, silence filled the cabin. Ethan looked at her profile. The commander who once saw him as less than nothing, now risking her life for him. He wondered what could drive someone like her to defy an empire. Then, as if she had heard his thoughts, she spoke again, her voice distant and filled with ghosts. "You asked me why I saved you," she said. "You deserve the truth." She activated a small device on the console, and a holographic image shimmered into existence between them. It showed a figure, a human, but not quite. His features were familiar, yet strange, his eyes bright with the same energy that had glowed between their hands. "Long ago," she said, "our ancestors were not so different. The Krynn were born from the same seed as humanity. We were one species, split apart by the Great Exodus, thousands of years ago. The Council hid this truth because fear is easier to rule than unity. Humans remind us of what we once were, emotional, flawed, but alive." Ethan stared at the image, his heart pounding with disbelief. "You're saying we're related?" "Yes," she said softly. "And that connection, the pulse you felt in your veins, it's proof that the bond still exists. The Council fears it because it means we are not their gods. We are their kin." Before Ethan could respond, the ship jolted violently. Warning lights flashed red as plasma fire tore across the hull. The Krynn fleet had caught up. Alyndra cursed under her breath, pulling the ship into a steep dive toward one of the moons. "Hold tight," she shouted. The vessel scraped through fragments of rock and lightning-charged dust, every impact shaking them to the core. One of the engines burst into flame, forcing her to divert power. "We can't outrun them," Ethan said, gripping the seat. "Then we fight," she answered, her eyes burning with defiance. Alyndra hit the release switch, launching countermeasures into the void. Explosions flared behind them as they plunged into the atmosphere of a fractured moon. The surface below was covered in glowing ruins, remnants of an ancient city buried in dust and silence. "This is where it began," Alyndra whispered. "The first colony of our ancestors, the cradle of both our species." The ship crashed hard, skidding across the rocky plain until it came to a grinding halt. Smoke filled the cockpit, alarms wailing, but they were alive. Outside, the ruins shimmered with strange light, humming faintly like a heartbeat. Alyndra rose, limping slightly, and looked at the ancient structures. "They will come for us soon," she said. "But before they do, you must see what they tried to erase." As she stepped out onto the alien soil, Ethan followed, feeling the pull of something older than memory. The ruins seemed to react to their presence, glowing brighter with every step they took. Then, at the heart of the ruins, a massive door of crystal and metal began to open, releasing a pulse of energy that made the ground tremble. Alyndra turned toward him, her eyes filled with awe and fear. "Whatever lies beyond this," she said softly, "will change everything, for humans and Krynn alike." And as the light swallowed them both, Ethan realized that the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to begin within the stars. The awakening of the forgotten. The moon's surface was a graveyard of forgotten dreams, blanketed in silver dust and echoes of long-dead voices. The ruins towered above Ethan and Alyndra like the skeletons of gods, carved from crystal and stone so ancient that time itself seemed to hold its breath. As they stepped through the massive door, a low hum filled the air, deep and rhythmic, as though the planet's very heart had begun to beat again after millennia of silence. The corridor beyond glowed faintly with blue light, each step activating symbols that shimmered beneath their feet. The air was heavy with age, carrying the faint scent of ash and ozone, the residue of something once divine. Alyndra moved slowly, her sharp eyes scanning the alien inscriptions etched along the walls. They were neither fully Krynn nor fully human. Something older, something in between. "These writings," she murmured, her voice trembling with both awe and fear. "They speak of the Founders, the first ones who carried the flame of thought across the stars." She traced a line of symbols with her gloved hand, and the wall rippled like liquid metal, revealing a hidden chamber beyond. Ethan followed her gaze, feeling an inexplicable pull, as though the chamber itself called his name. When they entered, the room came alive. Columns of light burst upward, forming a vast circular pattern around them. In the center floated a crystalline sphere, its core swirling with memories. Images of humans and Krynn standing side by side, building cities among the stars. Alyndra's breath caught in her throat as the truth unfolded before them. Not in words, but in visions. They saw ancient humans leave their homeworld, Earth, in ships of silver, carrying the dream of unity. They saw them reach new worlds, evolve, adapt, and split. Some transforming into the Krynn under harsh alien suns, others forgotten in the dust of history. The Council's lies dissolved before their eyes like smoke in sunlight. Ethan felt his knees weaken. The vision shifted again, showing the First War, a rebellion born from arrogance and fear. The Krynn, once human, saw themselves as divine, while the remnants of humanity struggled to survive. The divide became hatred. Empires rose and legends twisted. By the end, both sides forgot the truth. They were fighting their own reflection. When the vision faded, silence fell so thick it was almost sacred. Alyndra stood frozen, her eyes glistening with the storm of emotion she could no longer hide. "All this time," she whispered, "we believed we were the chosen ones. Yet we were only the exiled." Ethan stepped closer, the faint blue glow reflecting in his eyes. "Then maybe it's not too late to remember who we were." Alyndra looked at him, her voice hollow but filled with quiet determination. "The Council will never allow this truth to survive. They built their power on lies, on the belief that we were superior. If this knowledge spreads, their rule will crumble." Before Ethan could reply, a deep rumble shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the ancient lights flickered. Alyndra drew her weapon instantly, her instincts returning like a storm. "They found us," she said. Outside, distant explosions echoed through the ruins as the Krynn fleet descended. The air shimmered with the distortion of approaching ships. Alyndra turned to Ethan, her jaw tightening. "We have minutes at best. We need to reach the core chamber. The Founders left something here, a failsafe. If we activate it, the truth will broadcast across every Krynn channel." They ran through the corridors, their footsteps echoing off the ancient metal. The walls pulsed as if guiding them, each doorway opening before they reached it. The fortress seemed alive, recognizing them as its descendants. The deeper they went, the louder the hum grew, until it became a symphony of power thrumming through their bones. Finally, they reached a colossal gate inscribed with the mark of the two races intertwined, a human hand and a Krynn claw touching at the fingertips. Alyndra placed her palm on the symbol, and it flared to life with golden light. The gate opened to reveal a vast chamber filled with hovering crystals, each one containing a fragment of history. At its center lay a pedestal with an ancient interface, still glowing faintly. Ethan approached it cautiously. "What is this?" he asked. Alyndra's eyes softened. "It's a bridge, a link between mind and memory. The founders used it to pass knowledge to their descendants." She looked at him, her voice quiet. "It must be you," Ethan frowned. "Why me?" "Because the system recognizes human DNA," she said. "I cannot activate it. Only you can." He hesitated for a moment, then placed his hand on the pedestal. Instantly, streams of light burst outward, wrapping around his arm and racing through his veins. The chamber brightened until it felt like standing inside a star. Ethan gasped as images flooded his mind. Thousands of years of lost knowledge, pain, hope, and creation. He saw the first colonies, the betrayal that split humanity, and the cry of a dying world begging to be remembered. The pain was unbearable, yet he refused to let go. Alyndra stepped closer, her voice barely reaching him through the torrent. "Ethan, listen to me. Control it. The system will overload." But Ethan didn't stop. Through the blinding light, he saw something deeper, a presence, ancient and vast. A voice spoke not in sound, but in thought. "The seed of unity still burns within you. Carry it back to the stars." Then, just as suddenly as it began, the light faded. Ethan fell to his knees, his body trembling, his mind flooded with unbearable clarity. The chamber was silent again, save for the faint hum of power that now pulsed in sync with his heartbeat. Alyndra knelt beside him, gripping his shoulder. "What did you see?" He looked up at her, his eyes glowing faintly with golden light. "Everything," he said hoarsely. "And if we don't act now, it will all be lost again." Outside, the walls shook violently as the first wave of enemy troops breached the outer ruins. Alyndra stood and drew her weapon, her voice turning fierce again. "Then we make them remember." She reached for her communicator and began transmitting coordinates to every frequency she could reach. But before she could send the final signal, the ground split open with a thunderous roar. A massive warship descended through the storm clouds, its shadow swallowing the ruins. From its open hangar, beams of crimson light shot down, disintegrating the landscape around them. And then, through the blinding light, a tall figure appeared, armor dark as night, eyes burning with fury. Alyndra froze. "No," she whispered. "That's not possible." The figure stepped forward, his voice like steel scraping over stone. "Commander Vael," he said, "you have shamed your bloodline. You have betrayed your kind, and now you will watch your legacy burn." Ethan turned to Alyndra, confusion and dread flooding his chest. "Who is he asked. Her face went pale, her voice barely a whisper. "He is my father, the Supreme Chancellor of the Krynn Empire." The air grew cold as the storm outside roared louder, and in that moment Ethan realized that the battle ahead was no longer about survival, but about the very soul of two civilizations. The blood of empires, the sky above the ruined moon burned crimson as the Chancellor's warship descended, its engines roaring like a god's wrath, shaking the bones of the ancient world beneath. Dust and lightning swirled around the ruins where Ethan and Alyndra stood, the symbols of their ancestors glowing faintly beneath their feet. The towering shadow of the ship fell upon them, vast and oppressive, and from its center descended a column of light that solidified into the shape of a man. He was tall, regal, and terrifying in his silence, his armor forged of black metal streaked with gold veins, a crown of energy glowing faintly above his head. His presence made even the air tremble, as though reality itself feared to displease him. Chancellor Vael, the supreme leader of the Krynn Empire, stepped onto the ground with a grace that carried centuries of absolute power. His eyes, cold and brilliant as twin suns, locked onto his daughter. Alyndra straightened her back, her armor cracked and covered in dust, but her gaze steady and defiant. For a long moment, neither spoke. The silence stretched like a blade drawn too tight. Then the Chancellor's voice broke the air, deep and resonant, carrying both disappointment and restrained fury. "My daughter," he said slowly, "the stories were true. You have allowed yourself to be touched by filth." Alyndra's lips tightened, her chin raised in quiet defiance. "He is not filth," she said, her voice strong and unwavering. "He is proof of what you've buried. Proof that the Krynn and humans share the same blood." The Chancellor's face remained unmoved, but a faint flicker of disdain passed through his eyes. "A convenient lie," he replied, "one whispered by the weak to excuse their treason. You think an ancient ruin and a few glowing stones can erase millennia of order? You've been blinded by your own arrogance, Alyndra. You've forgotten who we are." "I've remembered what we were," she said, "and so have these walls. They remember the truth you tried to destroy." The Chancellor turned slightly, his gaze landing on Ethan, who stood beside her, battered but unbroken. His expression shifted from disdain to disgust. "And this creature," he said, "the human who defiles my daughter's honor, who poisons her mind with fantasies of unity. Do you even understand what she risks for you, animal? Every world she conquered, every soldier who swore loyalty to her, gone. Her name will be erased, her bloodline ended, and all because she thought a human's eyes held the truth." Ethan didn't flinch. His voice, though strained, carried quiet defiance. "Maybe she finally saw what you never did, that your empire was built on fear, not strength." A ripple of energy crackled through the air as the Chancellor's fury broke through his control. The ground beneath Ethan's feet cracked and a wave of force threw him backward. Alyndra rushed to shield him, her armor absorbing the shock. She staggered but didn't fall. "If you harm him," she warned, her voice shaking with restrained rage, "you will destroy what little honor remains in your empire." The Chancellor's cold laughter echoed through the ruins. "Honor? You dare speak of honor when you've tainted your name? When you've raised your weapon against your own kind?" His gaze darkened. "You are my finest creation, Alyndra. You were meant to cleanse this galaxy of weakness. And now look at you, defending the very thing you were born to exterminate." Alyndra's voice softened, though her eyes never wavered. "You made me a weapon, Father. But even a weapon can choose what it protects." For the first time, the Chancellor's composure cracked. His jaw tightened, his eyes narrowing as though the word "father" itself was an insult. He raised his hand, and a blade of pure energy formed in his grasp, long and burning with ancient power. "Then you leave me no choice," he said. "By the laws of our ancestors, the traitor's blood must cleanse her sin." Alyndra drew her own weapon, a curved silver blade that shimmered with pale light. The two blades met in a flash of fire, their clash sending shockwaves through the ruins. Sparks flew across the ancient walls as father and daughter fought, each strike a clash of conviction and blood. Ethan could barely stand, but he watched in awe and horror as the two figures danced through the storm like living gods. Every strike from the Chancellor carried the weight of an empire. Every counter from Alyndra carried the fury of a broken heart. "You've grown strong," he said between blows, "but strength without obedience is nothing." "I learned strength from you," she replied, blocking his strike and twisting with lethal grace. "But I learned courage from him." Their blades locked again, energy screaming between them. The ground quaked, the walls cracked, and lightning tore through the sky above. Ethan, clutching his chest, crawled toward the ancient pedestal where he had touched the light before. The sphere still glowed faintly, waiting. He remembered the voice that had spoken to him, the voice that had called him the seed of unity. The Founders had left him a choice, and he understood it now. The truth was not just knowledge, it was power. If he could awaken the full archive, it would send a pulse of memory through every Krynn mind in the galaxy, forcing them to remember what they had forgotten. He pressed his hand to the pedestal again. The sphere flared to life, and once more light surged through his body, merging with his thoughts, his blood, his soul. The system resisted him, its energy wild and ancient, but he forced himself to hold on. "Come on," he whispered through gritted teeth. "They need to see." Alyndra saw what he was doing. Her father saw it too. The Chancellor's fury erupted like a storm. "No!" he roared, lunging past her toward Ethan. But Alyndra moved faster, intercepting his blade with her own. The impact sent a shockwave that shattered the crystal floor beneath them. Energy flared around her as her armor began to crack, her body shaking from the force. Still, she held firm. "You will not touch him," she screamed. The Chancellor's blade pierced through her armor, driving deep into her side. The light in her eyes dimmed, but she did not fall. Instead, she twisted her blade upward, striking at his weapon's core. A surge of energy burst between them, sending both sprawling. Alyndra hit the ground hard, her breathing shallow, her body trembling. Ethan ran to her, his hands still glowing from the sphere. "Stay with me," he pleaded. She looked up at him, her lips trembling into a faint smile. "You did it," she whispered weakly. "The signal. It's spreading." Outside, beams of light shot into the sky, connecting the ruins to the stars above. Across the galaxy, every Krynn ship, every soldier, every world suddenly froze as visions of their true past filled their minds. They saw the faces of their ancestors, the humans who once stood beside them, the unity they had betrayed, the Empire's illusion shattered in a single heartbeat. The Chancellor rose slowly, his armor cracked, his expression filled with disbelief as he saw the light spreading across the stars. "What have you done?" he hissed. "You've doomed us all." Alyndra forced herself to her knees, blood staining the dust beneath her. "No, Father," she said softly. "We've saved what's left of us." As the light of the ancient truth illuminated the heavens, the Chancellor's warship began to fall from the sky, consumed by the very energy he had sought to control. And in that final moment, as the ruins trembled and the stars above burned brighter, Alyndra looked at Ethan with a faint, pained smile. "No empire lasts forever," she whispered. Her eyes closing slowly, the light engulfed them both, washing away the shadows of 1,000 years of lies. The echo of her light, the light that erupted from the ruins of the ancient moon, spread like a living wave across the void, racing through hyperspace, wrapping around stars, and penetrating the minds of every Krynn alive. From the grand citadels of their empire to the mining colonies buried beneath distant suns, the truth tore through their consciousness like the shattering of glass. For centuries, they had believed themselves divine, superior, born of purity, while humans were seen as filth and remnants of a broken age. But now, their illusions dissolved before their eyes, replaced by visions of their ancestors, humans with the same blood, the same laughter, the same sorrow. Empires that had taken millennia to build began to crumble not by war, but by memory. In the ruins below, the dust was still falling when Ethan opened his eyes again. The ground around him was scorched with golden light, the air thick with the faint hum of ancient power. He was alive, though his body trembled and every breath felt like a knife. His gaze immediately turned to Alyndra, lying motionless beside him. Her armor was cracked, her silver plating now dull and scorched. He crawled to her side, calling her name, his voice breaking into the silence. "Alyndra, please open your eyes." For a moment there was no response, only the faint flicker of dying light in the air. Then, slowly, her eyelids fluttered. She exhaled weakly, her breath shallow but real. "You're still here," she whispered faintly, her voice a fragile thread of sound. Ethan felt relief flood through him, his chest tightening as he pressed her hand against his. "I'm here," he said. "You saved us all." Her lips curved into a faint, weary smile. "No," she whispered, her eyes glimmering with both pain and pride. "You saved us. I only chose to believe." He looked around at the shattered temple, at the beams of light still pouring into the sky. The ruins seemed alive, vibrating with energy that hummed through the air like a living heartbeat. Alyndra turned her head slightly, watching the glow fade into the stars. "They will come for you now," she said quietly. "The council will fall, but in its place, others will rise. The truth is powerful, but so is fear, and fear never dies easily." Ethan shook his head. "Then I'll keep fighting," he said. "Not with weapons, but with what you've given me." Her hand tightened weakly around his. "Promise me one thing," she said, her voice trembling. "When they ask who broke the Empire, tell them it wasn't a warlord or a soldier. Tell them it was a human who refused to hate, and a Krynn who learned to feel." Ethan swallowed hard, unable to speak. His throat burned as he nodded. She closed her eyes again, her breathing slowing. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. Outside, the storm had subsided, and the crimson sky turned to silver dawn. For a moment, the entire world seemed to hold its breath, caught between death and rebirth. Then, a faint tremor shook the ground, and Ethan realized the ruins were collapsing. The energy that had been released was too great. The ancient structure was tearing itself apart. He tried to lift Alyndra, but her strength was fading fast. "You need to go," she said softly, her voice faint but resolute. "Take what we found. The archives, the truth, they're inside you now. Don't let them bury it again." He shook his head, refusing to leave her. "I'm not going without you." Her eyes opened one last time, meeting his with a look that silenced the stars themselves. "Ethan," she said, her voice breaking, "you already carry me with you." The ground split open as plasma fires erupted around them. Ethan felt the pull of gravity failing as pieces of the temple rose into the air, glowing like shards of heaven. He held her close, refusing to let go until the very ground beneath them gave way. The next moment was chaos. Light, fire, and silence all at once. When Ethan awoke again, he was lying inside a medical pod, the hum of machines surrounding him. His body ached, his lungs burned, but he was alive. The walls around him were smooth and metallic, illuminated by soft white light. For a second, he thought he was back in a Krynn prison, but then he saw the human insignia on the ceiling, faded but familiar. He was on a human rescue ship. The door slid open, and a man in a uniform stepped in, his face a mix of confusion and awe. "You're lucky to be breathing, soldier," he said. "We found you adrift near the Veyra moon. No ship, no beacon, just you, floating in a storm of light. What happened down there?" Ethan stared at him for a long moment, then looked out the small viewport beside his bed. In the distance, the ruins of the moon glowed faintly, still pulsing with the golden hue of the truth that had been unleashed. "A war ended," Ethan said quietly, "and something new began." The man frowned. "What about the aliens?" "The Krynn fleet disappeared right after the explosion. Whole sectors went dark. Their command networks gone." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the faint hum still echoing in his veins. "They're remembering," he said. "All of them." Days passed as the ship traveled through the silent void. News spread faster than light. The Krynn fleets had withdrawn from human space, their command structure collapsing in confusion. Entire divisions of their soldiers had surrendered without a fight. Across both species, strange broadcasts filled the airwaves. Songs of unity, old human languages mixed with alien hymns, all echoing from the ruins of Veyra IX. Some called it a miracle. Others called it the end of prophecy. But to Ethan, it was Alyndra's voice that lingered in every note. One evening, as he stood at the viewing deck, watching the endless stars stretch into infinity, he placed his hand on the glass and whispered, "You kept your promise. You crossed the line and changed everything." For a moment, he thought he saw her reflection beside him, a figure in silver armor, standing proud, her eyes soft but unyielding. Then she was gone, replaced by the quiet glow of the stars. Ethan smiled faintly, a tear slipping down his cheek. He knew now that she wasn't truly gone. The bond between their blood, their history, their hearts, it lived on. Not in monuments or empires, but in the fragile truth they had fought to awaken. The universe, vast and ancient, had finally remembered its forgotten heart, and among the ruins of its old gods, 2 souls, 1 human, 1 alien, had taught it to beat again. The line between stars' weeks turned into months, and the galaxy slowly awoke to a new dawn, one written not in the blood of conquest, but in the fragile ink of truth. The old banners of the Krynn Empire, once symbols of domination, now hung in silence across the void, their fleets adrift, their rulers gone. The revelation of shared origin had shaken the foundations of every throne and temple, and both human and Krynn worlds struggled to understand what it meant to no longer be enemies. What once separated them, arrogance, hatred, and the illusion of superiority, was dissolving into something uncertain, something painfully real. Yet in that uncertainty lay the first breath of freedom. Ethan Cole became an unwilling symbol of this change. To the humans, he was the man who survived the impossible and ended a war without a weapon. To the Krynn, he was the echo of their own forgotten humanity, a living reminder of what their ancestors had lost. His face appeared on transmissions across 100 systems, not as a hero, but as a question that neither side could yet answer. What does it mean to be one people again? He never cared for the fame. The weight of Alyndra's absence still followed him like a ghost through every corridor of the Alliance ships. Her sacrifice had broken the Empire's chains, but it had also left a silence he could not fill. Every night he dreamed of her voice, steady, sharp, and defiant. Sometimes he saw her standing beneath the twin suns of Veyra IX, her silver armor gleaming, her eyes watching him with that same quiet strength that had once terrified her enemies and comforted him. And every time he woke, the emptiness beside him reminded him that legends were built from pain. Then, one morning, everything changed. A message arrived, carried by a fragmented transmission discovered in the ruins of the Veyran moon. The signal was ancient, encrypted in a Krynn code that no living being could have written, at least not one still alive. The technicians brought it to him with hesitation. "We think it's a remnant of the energy surge," they said. "But there's something strange. It's encoded with your biosignature. The system won't open for anyone else." Ethan's heart pounded as he entered the control chamber. The lights dimmed and the holographic projection flickered to life. For a moment it was only static and whispers, and then, slowly, her face appeared. Commander Alyndra Vael, alive only in light. Her image was faint, her voice calm and distant, but her eyes carried the same fire he remembered. "If you are hearing this," her recording began softly, "then it means the truth has survived me. And if it has, then perhaps I was right about you. The archives held something I could never tell you before. The founders left us more than memory. They left us a choice. The bond between our species was not an accident. It was designed. They knew one day we would destroy ourselves in pride and forget our origins. But they also believed that somewhere, someday, one of us would cross the line and see beyond it." Ethan's chest tightened as her hologram stepped closer, her expression softening. "You once asked me why I saved you. I told you it was because I saw humanity in you. But the truth is, I saw something in you that I had lost in myself. You reminded me what courage looked like when it wasn't born from duty, but from compassion. You reminded me what it means to fight for something greater than victory." Her image wavered, as though the signal struggled to carry her final words. If the Krynn and the humans are to live as one again, then someone must guide them. Not as a soldier, not as a ruler, but as a bridge. That bridge is you, Ethan. Don't lead them with power. Lead them with the heart that defied me, that taught me how to feel again. The hologram paused. Alyndra's eyes met his one last time, and for a heartbeat she seemed almost alive. "Remember me not as the commander who captured you," she whispered, "but as the woman who crossed the line and found her soul on the other side." The image dissolved into golden light, scattering across the room like starlight fading at dawn. Ethan stood motionless, his hands trembling, his throat burning with words he could not say. For a long time, the room was silent, save for the hum of the ship's engines. Then he exhaled slowly and whispered, "You didn't just cross the line, Alyndra. You erased it." From that day onward, Ethan dedicated his life to rebuilding what had been broken. He traveled between worlds, speaking to councils, soldiers, and civilians of both races. He carried no weapons, wore no uniform, and made no demands. He spoke of what he had seen in the ruins, of the Founder's vision, a universe where strength was not measured by conquest, but by connection. Many rejected him. Many called him a dreamer. But slowly, like seeds taking root in barren soil, his words began to grow. Years passed, and the first joint human Krynn colonies rose from the ashes of war. Old enemies learned to work side by side, their children growing up unaware of the hatred that had once defined their ancestors. The stars that had witnessed countless battles now glimmered with the lights of cooperation, fragile but real. And through it all, Ethan remained a wanderer, a messenger carrying her legacy across the endless night. On the 10th anniversary of the fall of the Krynn Empire, he returned to Veyra IX. The ruins had become a sanctuary, preserved as a memorial for both species. He stood before the same crystal chamber where everything had changed, the same spot where Alyndra had taken her final breath. The silence was absolute, broken only by the soft hum of the wind brushing against the ancient stones. He knelt and placed his hand on the cracked ground. "You were right," he said softly. "The line between us was never real. It was only fear pretending to be destiny." As the twin suns rose over the horizon, their light bathed the ruins in gold and silver, merging into one. Ethan closed his eyes, feeling the warmth on his skin. In that light he could almost feel her presence again, the echo of her laughter, the whisper of her voice, the touch of her spirit that still lingered between the stars. And as the dawn spread across the galaxy she had died to change. Ethan Cole smiled through quiet tears, knowing that even in death she had won. The human and the alien had become one story, one memory, one destiny. She had crossed the line, and in doing so she had erased it forever.